She thought she was mocking a powerless black waiter. What she didn't know was that he spoke every word of her language, and that her empire was about to collapse in a single night. The Ritz Manhattan shimmered that night, velvet walls and chandeliers dripping in gold, a kind of place where billion-dollar handshakes clinked louder than the champagne flutes. At the center table sat Madame Zhao Lina, China's reigning queen of e-commerce, worth $70 billion, draped in scarlet silk. Around her perched 5 Wall Street heavyweights, men desperate to win her favor, their laughter forced, their nods rehearsed. Serving them was Marcus Hill, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his early 40s. To the untrained eye, he was just another server, but in his eyes there burned a quiet resilience. Madame Zhao flicked her diamond bracelet as Marcus poured the wine. Then, with a smirk curling her lips, she switched to Mandarin, assuming no one here could follow. Kan kan jie ji hei xing xing, she said slyly. Look at this black ape. The American execs, clueless in Mandarin, chuckled along anyway, eager to please. Zhao leaned back, voice dripping venom. Tamen ji neng ban pan zi, zhu buken dong nao zi. They can carry plates, never use their brains. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. A lifetime of being reduced to skin, not soul, had carved him into steel. But Zhao mistook his silence for ignorance. She thought she'd found a harmless punching bag for the evening's entertainment. Hey boy, she barked in broken English, exaggerating the words. More wine. Careful, not spill. You people no good with fine things. Laughter rippled. The exec sipped nervously, not daring to correct her. If it's your first time here, you're in the right spot. Welcome to a Black Voices Unheard, where stories of courage, resilience, and justice come alive. Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our inspiring tales. Comment your city and the time where you are. Let's see how far our community reaches. What Jalina didn't know was that Marcus Hill wasn't just a waiter. 5 years earlier, he'd been Professor Marcus Hill, one of America's top linguists, fluent in 7 languages, including Mandarin and Cantonese. His groundbreaking research on Sino-African trade relations had been quoted at the United Nations. But all that ended when a smear campaign, engineered by rivals he exposed for exploiting African minors, ruined his career. Branded untrustworthy, doors slammed, grants vanished, universities distanced themselves. He lost his chair, his home, even his marriage. Now, for the past year, he'd worked at Ritz Manhattan, invisible in plain sight, serving those who would never guess who he once was. As Zhao leaned forward, pointing her lacquered nail at him like he was furniture, Marcus exhaled slowly. He wasn't just carrying a tray, he was carrying history. And tonight, history was about to answer back. For the next hour, the dinner turned into a slow execution of dignity. Zhao now wasn't satisfied with tossing one insult. She wanted a spectacle. Every course, every pour, every glance at Marcus was another excuse to drag him lower. Watch closely, she told the execs in Mandarin, tapping her chopsticks against her wineglass. See how steady the ape's hands are? Years of carrying loads must make them strong. The Americans, though they didn't understand the words, chuckled nervously when she laughed. Better to join than risk offending the queen, who held billions in potential deals. Marcus placed down the lobster with his usual grace. His face was unreadable, a mask forged in fire. Inside, though, a storm rumbled, memories flashing of when he'd once sat at tables like these, not to serve, but to speak. He remembered delivering a lecture at Tsinghua University, Beijing's pride, explaining in flawless Mandarin the ethical pitfalls of resource exploitation in Africa. Professors applauded. Students swarmed him for autographs. That was only 6 years ago. Now he stood invisible, treated as less than human in the very language he once used to bridge cultures. Zhao raised her glass, her grin sharpened. You Americans, she switched to English now, her accent jagged but deliberate. Always talk equality, but look, she gestured at Marcus like he was an exhibit in a zoo. Give monkey tuxedo, still monkey. A couple of the execs shifted uncomfortably. Thomas Green, a venture capitalist from San Francisco, cleared his throat. Madam Zhao, maybe we should focus on... But she cut him off with a laugh. No, no, this is a lesson. In China we know, hierarchy is natural. Some born to rule, some born to serve. Your country too naive to see it. The words sliced. Marcus stood steady, but his hand tightened around the bottle of Chateau Lafite. He could have poured it over her head right there, but his revenge wasn't going to be messy. It was going to be devastating. She wasn't finished. Tell me, Zhao said, her tone dripping condescension. You ever even travel outside Harlem? The execs froze. Harlem. To her, his entire existence could only be summed up as some stereotype. Marcus met her gaze for the first time. Not a glare, not even defiance. Just a cool, steady stare that unsettled her for half a second before she smirked again. Don't worry, Zhao continued in Mandarin, loud enough for the table. He doesn't understand a word, but he understood every syllable, and he was memorizing them like lines in a play. Because soon the stage would be his. By the time the third course was cleared, the tension at the Ritz table was palpable. Zhao Lina had turned cruelty into an art form, weaving each insult with the confidence of someone convinced the world bowed to her wealth. Marcus returned with the duck confit, his stride steady, his expression calm. Inside, though, the quiet fire that had simmered for months was now ablaze. Zhao snapped her fingers. Snap, like summoning a dog. You, boy, she barked in jagged English. Name? Marcus, ma'am, he replied evenly. She repeated it, twisting it with mock disgust. Ma cuss. Fitting for waiter. Then, switching back to Mandarin, she sneered. He probably can't even spell it. These people don't bother with books. Brains too small. The Americans didn't grasp the words, but they saw the look in her eyes and the way Marcus's jaw clenched. A silence hung over the table, broken only by Zhao's laugh. And that was when Marcus made his move. He excused himself politely, retreating to the staff lounge. There, he pulled out his phone, not for comfort, but as a weapon. His thumb opened the voice recorder. Hours of Zhao's tirades had been captured. Every slur, every barb, every venomous philosophy on natural order. He scrolled through his contacts. One name made his pulse quicken. Ambassador Chen Rong, a respected Chinese diplomat Marcus had once collaborated with on academic exchanges. A man who loathed scandals and valued face above all else. Marcus typed quickly. Ambassador Chen, urgent, at Ritz Manhattan with Zhao Lina, recording multiple racial slurs she's throwing around in Mandarin, offensive to both Americans and Africans. I have evidence. Suggest we meet tomorrow. Send. Within minutes, the reply flashed back. Marcus, after all this time? Yes, bring evidence. Zhao Lina is already under scrutiny in Beijing for arrogance abroad. This may confirm what her rivals whisper. Marcus exhaled, calm washing over him. He wasn't just enduring tonight. He was engineering tomorrow. Back in the dining room, Zhao was ramping up. She leaned across the table, smirking as Marcus returned. Tell me, Marcus, she said, dripping sarcasm. You ever even see university? Or too busy? What's phrase? Dodging jail. The execs shifted uneasily. This wasn't witty banter anymore. It was cruelty, naked and raw. Marcus poured the last glass of wine, his movements precise. His silence wasn't surrender, it was patience. And Zhao Lina, drunk on her own arrogance, was digging the deepest pit of her life, unaware that every word was now a rope tightening around her empire. Because soon, the mask would drop, and the world would see exactly who Marcus Hill really was. The room smelled of truffle butter and aged wine, but all anyone could taste was discomfort. Zhao Lina was riding high, her laughter sharp enough to cut glass. She crooked her finger at Marcus like he was some circus attraction. Come, ape, she taunted in broken English. Then flipped back to Mandarin, loud enough for her guests. Let's see if the monkey can answer a simple question. Marcus, have you even heard of China? Can you point it on a map? The Americans shifted in their seats. Even if they didn't grasp the Mandarin, the sneer in her voice needed no translation. Marcus set the tray down. For the first time that night, he stood still, facing her directly. Oh, yes, madam, he said evenly, his voice steady. Zhao cackled, slapping the table. Adorable? He knows China exists? She turned to the execs, still speaking Mandarin. I'd bet my fortune this one's never left his ghetto. But then, silence. Because Marcus lifted his chin, locked eyes with her, and in flawless, cultured Mandarin, he spoke. Zhao Nushi, he began, this isn't a circus, and I am not your clown. The air froze. The Americans blinked in confusion. Zhao's chopsticks slipped from her fingers, clattering on the porcelain plate. What? What did you say? She stammered in English, her poise cracking. Marcus didn't miss a beat. In Mandarin again, smoother than hers, he continued, I said it's curious how some confuse wealth with wisdom and power with worth. You've mistaken silence for ignorance. But I've understood every word you spat tonight. The exec's jaws dropped. Even without knowing Mandarin, the authority in his tone was unmistakable. Zhao's face drained of color. Impossible. You can't. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his Mandarin flowing like water, perfect tones that only a seasoned scholar could produce. Impossible. Hardly. I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, Shanghainese, Spanish, French, Arabic, and yes, English. But I suppose you'd have known that had you ever looked beyond my skin. The Americans gawked. Thomas Green nearly choked on his scotch. Zhao sputtered, but you're just a server. Marcus's expression hardened. A server, yes, but also Professor Marcus Hill, Ph.D. in Comparative Linguistics, Yale University, former advisor on Sino-African trade, lecturer at Tsinghua and Oxford. I've debated ministers you've begged for contracts. I've written papers your board has cited. The table went deathly silent. Marcus's voice grew sharper, cutting through Zhao's arrogance. You assumed you were mocking a man too dim to understand. Instead, you've spent the evening performing your bigotry in front of a man who knows your language better than you do and who has it all recorded. He pulled his phone from his pocket, screen lighting up. Every word, every slur, every self-satisfied laugh. Zhao's chest heaved. For the first time in her empire-ruled life, she had no script. And Marcus Hill, once invisible, once dismissed, now owned the room. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. The glitter of chandeliers above seemed to dim under the weight of Marcus's words. Zhao Lina, once a queen on her throne of silk, sat frozen. The swagger was gone. Her painted lips trembled. You wouldn't dare, she whispered in English, hands tightening around her glass. Marcus held up his phone, the screen glowing with recording files. His tone was calm, clinical, like a surgeon about to cut. Every insult, every slur, every theory about racial hierarchies is here, and it's already been forwarded to Ambassador Chen Rong and the Institute for Global Affairs. Tomorrow morning, they'll have a full transcript. The execs gasped. Thomas Green leaned forward, eyes wide. My God, Professor Marcus Hill! I knew I recognized you. I cited your paper on Mandarin loanwords and Sino-African contracts just last year. You disappeared from the scene. What the hell are you doing here? Marcus straightened, unflinching. Surviving. His voice was low but steady, reverberating across the table. After being smeared, after doors slammed shut, after colleagues turned their backs, I took this job to eat, to live. And in that time, I've heard dozens like her speak as if my life is worth less than the wine they spill. He turned his gaze back to Zhao, his eyes sharp, unyielding. But you, Madame Zhao, you went further. You broadcasted your hate like a badge of honor. You even recorded yourself, boasting that America trains its black men to serve like beasts. Do you know what Beijing will do when they see that? Zhao's face blanched. Her empire had survived trade wars, lawsuits, and boardroom battles. But scandal? Shame abroad? That was lethal. In China, losing face could cripple a dynasty. Please, she rasped in Mandarin, voice cracking. Delete it. We can make arrangement. Marcus tilted his head. A sad, almost pitying smile tugged at his lips. Arrangement? You insulted not just me, but every black man, woman, and child who's ever been reduced to less than human by people like you. And now, for once, there are consequences. No boardroom deal, no billion-dollar contract can shield you from the truth of your own words. The Americans sat stunned. One muttered, "Christ, this is career suicide for her." Zhao reached out a trembling hand across the table, her diamond ring catching the light. "Dr. Hill, Professor Hill, I didn't know it was you." Marcus's reply was a dagger wrapped in velvet. "And if I wasn't me, if I was simply Marcus the waiter, would your cruelty be excused? Respect isn't owed only to titles or degrees. It's owed to every soul you meet." Zhao's mouth opened, but no words came. Her empire had built walls of money and pride, but not even billions could shield her from the truth now. Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket, his calm demeanor like steel forged in fire. "I don't need vengeance, Madame Zhao. I only need truth. And tonight, you gave it to me, gift-wrapped in your own arrogance." The room remained silent, except for the clink of Thomas Green setting down his untouched glass, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's finished." And Zhao Lina knew it too. 4 months after that fateful night at the Ritz, the story had traveled further than Zhao Lina's private jet ever could. The Financial Times splashed it across their front page. Ling Tech billionaire loses $800 million in U.S. contracts after racist tirade video surfaces. Clips of Zhao's drunken monologue, subtitled in English and Mandarin, went viral within days. Social media exploded, hashtags trended in both countries. Activists called her a global embarrassment. Politicians condemned her remarks. Even rival Chinese tycoons, smelling blood, distanced themselves. Beijing's official stance was swift and merciless. Ling Tech's leadership must reflect on behavior inconsistent with China's values abroad. Within a week, Zhao was stripped of international speaking engagements. Within a month, she was quietly removed from several trade committees. Her board, hungry to salvage what was left, announced she was taking an indefinite leave for health reasons. Everyone knew it was exile. At 42, the queen of e-commerce was dethroned. Meanwhile, Marcus Hill's life flipped in the opposite direction. The New York Times ran his profile. From waiter to whistleblower, the linguist who exposed racism at the Ritz. The video of him calmly, fluently dismantling Zhao in Mandarin racked up 75 million views in 3 weeks. Students in Beijing shared it with pride, astonished that an American scholar spoke their mother tongue with such elegance. Young black men across the U.S. reposted the clip with the caption, "This is how we fight back." Invitations poured in. Harvard wanted him lecturing again. Oxford offered a fellowship. The African Union asked him to advise on trade negotiations. Even the Commerce Department, the same system that had once turned its back, extended an olive branch, quietly admitting they had misjudged his case. Marcus accepted selectively, not every offer. He wasn't chasing prestige anymore. He chose platforms where he could make a difference. He returned to teaching part-time, mentoring young black scholars in international relations. And once a week, he still worked a shift at the Ritz, this time not as a server, but as a consultant and co-owner. The Ritz had turned that humiliating night into a new mission, a zero-tolerance code on discrimination, dubbed the Marcus Hill policy. Restaurants across the country adopted similar pledges. And Marcus? He didn't gloat. He didn't revel in Zhao's downfall. When asked by MSNBC what justice meant to him, he simply said, "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about truth. And truth is that dignity belongs to every human being, whether they wear a silk gown or a waiter's uniform." As for Zhao Lina, she retreated to Beijing, her empire fractured, her name a stain. Former friends ghosted her. Rivals devoured her contracts. She lived in a penthouse cage of her own making, haunted by the night a mere waiter exposed her to the world. And Marcus Hill's name? It became a symbol, a reminder, a story told in classrooms, boardrooms, and homes across continents. That sometimes the quietest man in the room holds the sharpest blade. Et chateau, that arrogance builds empires, but respect builds legacies. And that one evening of cruelty can cost billions, while one evening of dignity can change the world.